So it's holiday time here in the park, and they're all decked out. It's so pretty. Greetings, and welcome back to Magic Monday, the series where I take you with me around the Disneyland Resort to sample and review every last eatery. Today, as you can see, we are shooting against a slightly different backdrop. That's because my living room has become kind of a little bit of a war zone. I'm in the middle of a big sewing project, and it's just a huge mess. So, apologies for the alternate location, but other than that, business is going to proceed as usual. Today we are going to be visiting the Candy Palace in Disneyland. The Candy Palace is located on the western side of Main Street, USA. The fastest way to get to the Candy Palace is to enter Main Street, USA through the western gate, follow Main Street down about halfway, just past Carnation Cafe and Gibson Girl Ice Cream, and underneath the Penny Arcade sign you will find the entrance to Candy Palace. So let's go take a look, shall we? Here we are at the Penny Arcade / Candy Palace. Let's go take a look at what's inside. There's Madame Esmeralda giving out fortunes, some games, and a whole lot of candy. Candy everywhere. So as I mentioned before in my last video, this shop front goes on for quite a ways. You can see over here is where we move into Gibson Girl Ice Cream, and then beyond that is Carnation Cafe. I love the arcade feel in here. It's just this massive space with just racks and racks and racks of candy. Okay, so as you can see, I am sitting outside. Just behind me is the northern entrance to the Candy Palace / Penny Arcade. And I ended up only getting one item. I thought I was going to try and get something from the bakery and something from the just candy shop, but Disneyland's not super cheap, so I only ended up getting one item. I got their peppermint fudge, which looks absolutely delicious, and I'm gonna give it a try. I'm really excited. And we're back. So now that we have seen the Candy Palace, it's time to determine how it rates. The first criteria on my list is atmosphere, and the atmosphere at the Candy Palace is enjoyable. I like the turn of the 20th century Penny Arcade theme that they're running with. They do have a couple little games that you can play. You can have your fortune told by Esmeralda. There's a heat sensor hand grip game. There's a couple other things that you can pour some quarters into and see what happens. But for the most part, it is just a facade for this candy store. And I enjoy the atmosphere. I just wish that the venue didn't take up as much space as it does. I don't really think the Penny Arcade is a necessary piece of Main Street anymore. As you probably have already seen in my Gibson Girl review video, I feel that a large part of the Candy Palace could be converted into an expansion of the ice cream parlor in order to turn Gibson Girl into something really special. The Candy Palace doesn't need to be as big as it is. I think you could easily fit everything that Candy Palace needs to have in it in that final back extension over by where it opens up into Jolly Holiday. I really feel like condensing that space would make it more appealing, because you would get a stronger sense of the arcade style if it wasn't spread as thin, and then Gibson Girl would have room to breathe. I really feel like that would just help everything. So I'm going to give the atmosphere an average 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoy it. I enjoy the theme. I've said before, but I love the turn of the 20th century American style that all of Main Street USA has. I like the Penny Arcade stuff. I think it's enjoyable. The only thing is, aside from everything I've said about Gibson Girl, I do feel like that Penny Arcade notion is something we see at other parks. And one of the things that is important to me about Disney is that it feel distinctively like Disney and not like any other theme park you could ever go visit. And that's one of the problems I've always had with like California Adventure and some of the other newer stuff that Disney's come up with, is that a lot of sort of the roller coaster and midway stuff that they have just feels too generic. It feels too much like any other amusement park, and Disney should stand on its own and have its own distinctive identity. And I feel like that kind of 19th, early 20th century penny arcade is something we see at other places, and Disney doesn't really need it. I'm not saying they should get rid of it entirely, but I feel like it just takes up way more space than it needs to currently. So I'm going to stick with 3 out of 5, but it's a low 3. I kind of want to give it a 2, but I feel like that's not really being fair. Next up we have the service. The service experience that I had this morning was pleasant. I took a little bit of time wandering around and looking at all of my options, and when I finally picked something out, there wasn't anyone at the counter anymore because they'd gone to help someone else. So I did have to wait for a minute, but as soon as people saw that I was in fact ready to place an order and complete my transaction, they jumped right on it and took care of me, and they do accept the annual pass holder discounts, which I didn't think they would, and it went very smoothly. So I'm going to give them a 4 on service, which I don't normally do for quick over-the-counter stuff, but they were really on top of their business this morning and very friendly while doing it. And I just felt like there was a very strong sense of organization. Price point, I was actually prepared to rate them pretty low on, because my block of fudge, which was about yay big, cost me about $4.50. But then when I finally bit into it, as so overpoweringly strong that I really felt like it ended up becoming worth that price, because it's going to last me a while. It wasn't strong in a way that made me dislike it, just strong in a way that made me want to take very small bites that would last me for a very long time. And so that sort of lent to the longevity of this food item, or the shareability of this food item, which then in turn made it worth that high price point. It was very expensive for not a very large item, but I'm gonna have that for probably the next 4 or 5 days and just take little slices off of it. And that never happens with me, because I usually eat everything right away. I almost never have leftovers. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that yes, it's expensive, but it is worth the price. So I'm going to give it a fair, average 3-star rating. Now for the food itself, I touched on this a little bit already, but it was very, very strong and very, very, very sweet. It tasted a lot like an Andes Mint, and even though I know that they do make that fudge there in the park, it is a little bit of a turnoff when you bite into something and then feel like it tastes just like, or very reminiscent of, something that is processed and prepackaged and mass-produced. And the flavor was very, very reminiscent of an after-dinner mint that you can find at half a dozen restaurants in any given city. So I really like that flavor, I really like that taste, but on the other hand, it wasn't distinguishing itself or unique or special from that, and it was really incredibly sweet and really incredibly strong, but it was still tasty, and the strength and potency of the flavor meant that it's going to be something that I'm going to eat slowly and over a period of time, which means it's going to last longer and I'm going to be able to enjoy it more. So it's really, it's a pretty big toss-up. There are some really unfortunate downsides to the food itself, and then there's some really surprising sort of positives to the food itself. So I am going to also give the food itself a 3 out of 5 stars. That brings us around to an average of, I think, 3.25 stars out of 5. I'm going to round it down to a 3, even though the service was really, really pretty great this morning. I feel like it probably isn't that way all the time. I was in there when it was kind of dead. I am sure it kind of averages out over the course of the day. And also, that little bump in service doesn't really make up for the just sort of averageness of this place, especially when you consider how small and compact Disneyland is and how valuable any given piece of real estate is in the Disneyland park. For this to be so kind of forgettable and not really impressive. It's frustrating to see how much real estate it takes up in the map of the park. It should not be as big as it is. They should really, really compact it, possibly even get rid of it. I think there would probably be an outrage of people, of longtime fans of the parks, if they were to get rid of it forever, because it is one of those mainstay sort of tradition places from the very beginning of the opening of the park, but they need to find something else to do with that space. So that's it for this week's episode. Come on back tomorrow morning for some Tokyo Tuesday fun with Blaze Rocket. I'm excited. I don't actually know what's coming. I haven't seen this one yet, so I will be just as surprised as you are. If you are a fan of the Candy Palace and want to defend its presence on Main Street USA, or you have an idea of something better that could possibly go in its place, let me know what you have to say in the comments below. Make sure to like this video for us, it really helps us out, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't. If you want to find myself, or Blaze Rocket, or Magic Meals as a whole on social media, I will have links in the description box below, and I will see you guys next week for some more Monday magic.